In a quiet room, an old clock ticked loudly. My husband John was glued to the TV, ignoring me completely. I felt fed up with all the problems we'd had over the years. John broke the silence, sneering at me. I told him firmly, "I'm leaving." He mocked me, saying I couldn't survive without him. But his words only made me more determined. I couldn't take his neglect and his mom's meddling anymore. It was time to leave and take charge of my life. "I can handle it," I said confidently, standing up. Even though I was nervous about what was next, I felt strong. John's mom, who had been living with us for a while, walked in and saw my packed bags. "Leaving already?" she sneered, thinking I couldn't handle their family issues. I ignored her and grabbed my bags, heading for the door. John just sat there, saying, "You'll be back. You can't do this alone." As I stepped out of the house, a feeling of freedom washed over me. The evening air was refreshing, lifting my spirits. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. For 2 decades, I'd been playing the role of John's obedient wife, feeling more like a convenience than a partner. My son, Elias, was the only source of happiness, but even he couldn't fill the void in my heart. John's mom made things worse with her constant criticism and manipulation. Finding a small, peaceful apartment was a relief. It became my safe space where I could think without judgment. I ignored calls and messages from John and his mom, who begged and threatened me. I was determined to stand my ground and move forward. My coworkers at the library, where I'd worked for a long time, supported me. They had seen how I'd been struggling and were happy to see me finding my strength again. Surrounded by books and understanding friends, I started to feel like myself again and began to believe in a brighter future. While I was settling into my new life, Elias called me, sounding worried. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. I reassured him, feeling calm for the first time in years. "Yes, Elias, I'm doing better than ever." But then he told me about the problems at home. My decision to leave hadn't gone down well. John had turned to drinking, and his mom wouldn't stop blaming me for leaving. I pushed away the guilt, reminding myself that they needed to respect my decisions. Elias hesitated, but then expressed his support for me prioritizing my happiness. Ending the call, I realized this was just the beginning of proving myself to John and his mother, who had underestimated me for too long. It was time they saw I wasn't the obedient woman they thought I was. My journey to self-discovery and independence had only just begun. In my quiet new home, I reflected on the 28 years with John. What started as a promising relationship had soured over time. John's charm and our shared dreams once seemed perfect, but he became more focused on himself, neglecting our family. Elias's birth didn't bring us closer, it highlighted our growing distance. John thought providing money was enough, leaving me to handle the emotional support. His mother, Ariana, was always there, criticizing my parenting. She'd say I was spoiling Elias, insisting John never needed that kind of care. Despite her comments, I focused on raising Elias well. He grew into a thoughtful and independent man, a bright spot in our tense home. Things reached a breaking point when Ariana moved in without asking, claiming she was lonely. Her presence was suffocating. She criticized everything from my cooking to my clothes, hinting that John could have chosen a better partner. This new phase of my life was all about breaking free from years of control and finding myself again, a journey I was just beginning. Ariana's constant criticisms were hard to ignore, but what really shook me was discovering John's deception. I stumbled upon bank statements one day that revealed large amounts of money being spent from our joint account. It turned out this money was being wasted on Ariana's gambling addiction and John's secret indulgences. Whenever I tried to confront them about it, it led to heated arguments, with John always taking his mother's side. "She's my mom, Stella. She needs this," he'd insist, dismissing my concerns. The final straw came when I overheard them plotting to take full control of our finances, pushing me aside and leaving me powerless in my own home. That's when I realized I couldn't keep living under their control. The day I decided to leave, I promised myself I'd make them understand the pain they caused. My plan was simple but powerful, to challenge their egos and their control. I started by legally separating our finances, which shocked John. "What are you doing?" he demanded on the phone. "I'm protecting myself, something I should have done a long time ago," I replied calmly but firmly. Ariana's reaction was even more dramatic. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you," she screamed when she found out. But I didn't let it faze me. The time of me being submissive was over. Now I was setting my own rules, beginning their reckoning. After I took control of my finances, things got chaotic. John and Ariana showed their true colors through their anger. Their attempts to intimidate me with angry phone calls didn't work. "You think you're smart, Stella," John sneered over the phone. "You're nothing without me. They'll come crawling back." "Not a chance, John. I won't let you manipulate me anymore," I shot back, standing my ground. Ariana's threats were even harsher. "You'll regret this, Stella. You've ruined our family." "There was no family to ruin, Ariana. It was all fake," I countered. Despite their threats, I felt free. The fear that used to control me was gone, replaced by a determination for justice. It was time for them to face the consequences. I started by reaching out to old friends and telling them about the lies and manipulation John and Ariana had put me through. My honest revelation spread quickly, tarnishing their once spotless reputations. John, who always cared about his social standing, was embarrassed. "How could you do this to me?" he asked me, shocked. "You did it to yourself," I replied calmly. "I'm just telling the truth." Ariana faced the community's disapproval too. "You've made us outcasts," she accused, seeing it as a fight. But I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "No, Ariana, this isn't a fight. It's about being responsible for your actions," I told her. Seeing their social circles fall apart showed how powerful the truth can be. John's supporters distanced themselves, wary of his damaged reputation, while Ariana lost influence as her gambling problem and manipulative tactics were exposed. But I didn't stop at just exposing them socially. I knew their weak spot was their finances. With the help of a good lawyer, I fought for my fair share of our joint assets. Ariana's debts from gambling and John's mishandling of money were brought to light. The legal battles were tough, but I stayed strong. Their lies were no match for the truth, and I won a significant victory in court. When the judge ruled in my favor, I could see the defeat in John and Ariana's faces. This win meant more than just money. It showed that I was morally right. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," John said, sounding defeated. "No, John, you destroyed our family long ago. I'm just picking up the pieces," I replied, leaving the courtroom feeling free for the first time in years. I was filled with hope for a future without the weight of my past. After the court ruling, I started rebuilding my life with the assets that were rightfully mine. Stepping away from John and Ariana's influence, they couldn't believe the extent of their downfall. This was the start of a new chapter for me, one of independence and self-discovery, ready to embrace whatever came my way. The crumbling of John and Ariana's facades was just the beginning of my journey to rediscover myself and pursue real happiness and freedom. One evening, John called in a fit of desperation. "You can't just change our lives like this, Stella," he pleaded over the phone. "I'm just taking back what's rightfully mine," I replied firmly. "Maybe you should have thought about the consequences before betraying my trust." Ariana, however, took a sneakier approach. She tried to turn family members against me, painting herself as the victim. "You're tearing our family apart, Stella," she accused me when we bumped into each other at the grocery store. "This family was broken long before I left," I replied, refusing to show any sign of distress. I embraced my new freedom, enjoying the ability to control my own life. I cut off their access to me by changing my phone number and found comfort in volunteering at a local shelter, helping others who have faced similar struggles. But my fight for justice wasn't over yet. I found out Ariana planned to challenge the court's decision, hoping to get money for her gambling habit. "You won't win, Stella. I'll make sure you pay," she threatened in a message sent through a relative. In defiance, I strengthened my legal defenses, prepared to counter any challenge she brought forward. The person who once avoided conflict had become a determined advocate for her own rights. Meanwhile, John was crumbling under the pressure. His once spotless reputation was now tarnished, affecting his career. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," he admitted during a moment of reflection. "You brought this on yourself, John." "I just exposed the truth," I replied. As time passed, I watched as their seemingly stable lives fell apart. Ariana's attempt to overturn the court's decision failed, leaving her in financial and social ruin. John's professional life continued to decline, his reputation irreparably damaged. However, I didn't feel any joy in watching their downfall. Though it was an important part of reclaiming myself, it didn't bring me satisfaction. My journey was about healing and finding myself, far beyond their punishment. Regaining my independence and self-respect was a big step, but the wounds from neglect and emotional abuse were still healing. As I rebuilt my life, my main goal was to find inner peace and happiness. My journey was transformative, leading me out of the darkness of my past. I became stronger and more resilient. My story wasn't about revenge, but about freedom, a celebration of the human spirit's ability to overcome challenges. Months had gone by since the court ruled in my favor, but the effects lingered. John and Ariana had drifted from their social circles, shadows of their former selves. Then Elias visited unexpectedly with troubling news. Dad lost his job, and his drinking has gotten worse. Grandma lost everything to gambling. They're selling the house, he said, the weight of his words palpable. My heart ached for Elias. Despite the distance, family ties tugged at my emotions. Did we do the right thing? Elias wondered quietly. I reassured him, though with a heavy heart, that we stood up for what was right. They made their choices. I didn't find satisfaction in John and Ariana's downfall. Instead, it reminded me of the importance of living with integrity and respecting others. In the following weeks, rumors spread about the sale of their house, signaling the end of their decline. John struggled to find work because of his damaged reputation, and Ariana was isolated as her addiction became known. One evening, I ran into John during a walk. He looked like a different person, defeated. There's nothing to say, he finally said, defeated. This brief encounter was powerful. It showed how much our lives had changed because of the choices we made. It was here that I found true happiness, peace, and a sense of self that couldn't be shaken.
That good-for-nothing wife. Just ditch that woman before we get into real trouble. I overheard my husband Brad and his mother say as they thought I was asleep. Their attitudes had completely changed. They left home, but shamelessly returned, claiming they didn't want to lose their assets, and began causing chaos. When I confronted them with the reality of our situation, their true colors showed. My name is Daisy. I'm 30 years old. After dating Brad for 5 years, we got engaged and moved in with his parents. Initially, we agreed to buy our own house when we had our first child. Nearly 2 years have passed without a child, and we're still living with his parents. Living with Brad, his mother, and his younger brother, I often became a subject of concern for those around me. My parents lived far away and couldn't help, but my husband was always kind, and I had a good relationship with my mother-in-law, which made me happy. One day, I had an accident and broke a bone, ending up hospitalized and unable to move on my own. At first, my husband and mother-in-law visited me daily, showing their concern, but soon, their visits dwindled to once a week. Despite being grateful for their visits, my world shattered when I overheard their conversation after the doctor informed me I might have lasting injuries. She can't do housework or anything, but she's going to cost us more than ever. What a useless wife, Brad sneered. With her lingering issues, having kids is even more out of the question. Maybe it's a good thing we don't have kids. If she stays bedridden, I'll have to do all the housework and care for her. I didn't sign up for this, he continued. I didn't either, his mother chimed in. She was supposed to do the housework and caregiving. If she hadn't gotten into that accident, she could have continued as our maid. What a disappointment. Before this becomes too troublesome, get rid of her. I'll divorce her quickly, Brad agreed. Thinking I was asleep, they had this conversation in my hospital room. To them, I was nothing more than a maid and caregiver. Their attitudes became blatantly cold afterward. Your husband hardly comes anymore, does he? He must be searching for a new woman. Only you had a child, you might have kept him, my mother-in-law taunted. As Brad's visits became even less frequent, she seemed to take pleasure in saying nasty things. However, my brother-in-law stepped up. He did the laundry, checked if I needed anything, and was generally very helpful. He visited me nearly every day and even took me outside in my wheelchair, providing a small comfort in an otherwise painful time. When I felt suffocated by my long hospitalization, I was often exhausted from physical therapy and sometimes wanted to give up. But I think I've made it this far thanks to my brother-in-law. His presence was an immense help to me. Although I'm not getting worse and physical therapy is going well, it's still uncertain if there will be any lasting issues. When I told my husband and mother-in-law about this, they started arguing. Seriously? See, I told you we should have gotten rid of her sooner. My mother-in-law scoffed. What are you two even saying? Aren't you being too harsh on Daisy, who's been taking care of our house and our father all this time? my brother-in-law retorted. In reality, I had been caring for my father-in-law for 5 years while dating my husband. When we started dating, Brad's parents suggested, "Why don't you live together since you're going to get married anyway? It's a great deal. We can save money, live together, and then get married when we're settled," they added. When I hesitated, they reassured me, "It's okay. We have plenty of rooms and we won't invade your privacy. Plus, you don't need to pay rent. You want to marry my son, right?" How could I refuse? But in return, they had a favor to ask. "Daisy, while you're working from home, can you look after our father who needs care? It's only for 4 to 5 hours during the day when I'm out for my part-time job," Brad's mother asked. "We also have my brother, so the two of you can work together." My brother-in-law, who also worked from home, and I teamed up to take care of my father-in-law. My father-in-law and brother-in-law were very close. My father-in-law had a hobby of collecting furniture and even had a separate house just for it. My brother-in-law and I always enjoyed hearing about his hobby, and my father-in-law loved his caring son, Reagan. Eventually, my father-in-law's health began to decline, and after years of care, he passed away. After that, my husband proposed to me, saying, "Thank you for always taking care of my father. Let's continue to be together. Let's get married." Despite having worked hard on housework and caregiving, the moment I became immobile, my husband and mother-in-law's attitude changed as if I were worthless. Even I, normally composed, was infuriated. "Force me, please pay what you're supposed to," I demanded. "Well, I don't want any trouble, so I'll give you the house. Let's waive the division of other property," Brad conceded. I wondered if he would really give me the house, but since my father-in-law had left a substantial inheritance, it seemed plausible. The inheritance, divided among my mother-in-law, Brad, and Reagan, amounted to approximately $300,000 each, so Brad seemed to have enough assets. Reagan was tasked with handling all the paperwork with the executor, requiring several trips to the court, which was quite a hassle. "No way, we can't give away the house. If we divide the property, I'll lose half my savings," Brad protested. "It's just a wastefully large house in the countryside. Even if we give it away, it's not an issue. At the highest estimate, it's only worth about $100,000, and various fees will be deducted when we sell it. It's cheaper than losing half my savings," Reagan reasoned. "Well, if you say so, Brad, but what if she demands more later? What if rumors spread in the neighborhood because we abandoned her?" My mother-in-law worried. As they debated what to do with me, Reagan interrupted, "Then I'll take her in." "Why would you go out of your way to do that?" Brad asked suspiciously. "Ah, you've been interested in Daisy, haven't you? That's why you're so willing. You can have her if you want, but she's no longer of any use to us. Don't ask to take Daisy and the house back later, okay?" My mother-in-law sneered. "Why would I? I just hope you won't come asking for money later. And remember, you can't return damaged goods," Reagan replied sharply. Brad and Reagan signed the papers and arranged to formally change the property title through a lawyer. "I'll take out some money from my savings, so why don't you find a younger, healthier, and prettier woman to marry and build a better house?" Reagan suggested. "Sounds good," Brad agreed. Then he turned to me. "Hey Daisy, get a lawyer to file for our divorce quickly." They said they'd stay in a hotel for a while and left the room. Reagan and I silently saw them off. I had to find a lawyer to file for our divorce first. With Reagan's help, I filed for the divorce, and in a few days, Brad and I became complete strangers. A week later, Brad and my mother-in-law packed their belongings and left the house. It was strange that Reagan, Brad's brother, continued to visit me. "Now that I've divorced your brother, there's no need for you to worry about your former sister-in-law," I told him. He responded, "I'm doing this because I wanted to let you know that I didn't get along with you just because you were my brother's wife. We both provided care and did housework together. We've talked a lot more in these 7 years than you ever did with my brother. We're friends, aren't we?" Reagan said with a gentle smile. All I could do was express my thanks and gratitude. A month later, I was discharged from the hospital. Although I had to visit for physical therapy, I felt relieved to be home after such a long time. "Do you think those two will ever come back? I'm worried they might return and make me work again," I confided. "If they come back, I'll drive them away. I can't forgive them for treating you so horribly. Plus, they have no right to return to this house," Reagan reassured me. I was still unable to move as before, so Reagan took care of most of the household chores. Fortunately, as I had been working from home as a freelancer, I was able to return to work and contribute financially. Thanks to the bi-weekly physical therapy, I recovered smoothly without any complications. A year later, I was able to live as before, and Reagan and I collaborated on the housework. We spent more time together, syncing our days off to go on trips. Just when I thought our peaceful days would continue, a storm suddenly came. One night, while Reagan and I were eating dinner, there was a knock on the door and the intercom rang repeatedly. Nervously, I answered, and the person on the monitor was Brad. "Hey, open up," he demanded, thinking this noise might disturb the neighbors. I opened the front door, and Brad entered the house without hesitation. "What do you want?" I asked, irritated by his sudden appearance. "Why do I have to put up with such an attitude just for coming home? This isn't your home anymore. State your business and leave quickly," I demanded. "What are you talking about? I'll be living here again from today." "Oh, I'm hungry. Hey Daisy, give me some food," Brad demanded, expecting me to serve him. "Hey, cut it out. Why are you here?" I asked, growing increasingly frustrated. "Well, I've spent almost all my money, and my mom will be here soon too, so leave the door unlocked," he said casually. As I remained silent, he remarked, "Oh, you're all healed up, huh? That's great. Let's get back together. You must have had a hard time without me." His audacity made me feel sick. "Stop it. I divorced you. I don't care about you anymore," I snapped. "Don't get cocky. You've been living on my money all this time, and you can't do anything but housework. Just shut up and do as I say," Brad shouted, his voice dripping with entitlement. Just then, the door opened, and his mother arrived. "You left the door unlocked. That's careless." "Oh, what's going on?" she asked, noticing the tension. "She's been getting cheeky, so I was giving her a bit of education. She's grown thick-skinned in the year we've been away," Brad explained casually, as if it were a normal occurrence. Once again, Brad and his mother began to make themselves at home as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Enough is enough. This isn't your home. I'm calling the police," I declared, fed up with their intrusion. "Oh yeah, about that. This house was originally in your father's name, right? So that means that the heir, including my mother, makes our agreement null and void, doesn't it?" Brad shouted, making an unreasonable claim. "You promised to give me the house. If you're nullifying that, then everything about the division of property should be nullified as well. Give me half the savings," he demanded. "Sure, but I don't have it anymore. Didn't I tell you earlier? I've squandered it all. I quit my job, spent it all on booze, fun, investments, you name it. I also have some debts with consumer finance, about $20,000, Brad confessed, shocking me with his recklessness. "I guess, can you pay for me?" Brad asked, catching me off guard. Initially, I thought he was lying, but his mother confirmed it. "I can't lend you that much money," I replied, taken aback. "I'm not asking you to lend it. I'm telling you to pay it," Brad demanded. "I'm not giving you any money. I'm calling the police," I declared, feeling a surge of anger. As Reagan dialed the police to report the situation, Brad's demeanor shifted. "You've become quite daring in the past year. You're just showing off because Daisy's here," he sneered. Brad began to wreak havoc in the house, breaking precious furniture that had been my father-in-law's keepsake. His mother joined in, destroying furniture and laughing as she did so. "It's my father's and aunt's," I pleaded, horrified by their rampage. About 10 minutes later, when the police arrived, I explained the situation to them. "This is quite a mess. Let's hear your side of the story," the officer said. "What's wrong with me breaking things in my own house?" Brad retorted. "That's right, we're just crushing things we don't need." "What's the problem?" his mother added. When the police seemed unsure how to respond, Reagan stepped in. "This house has never belonged to these two. It's under Daisy's name." "Huh? What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" Brad exclaimed. "Actually, before he passed away, our father-in-law left a will through a lawyer. Of course, you wouldn't know. You handed over what you were told and left the rest to Reagan. So this house was yours from the beginning," Reagan explained. As the truth sunk in, Brad and his mother stood dumbfounded. "So, this isn't your property, then?" the officer clarified. "Oh, hold on, but I'm her ex-husband. We're like family, so she'll forgive me, right?" Brad attempted to reason. "Don't make me laugh. You're a stranger once you're an ex. I don't even know that you were in contact with another woman before our divorce was finalized and who treated me like a maid if not you," I countered firmly. No, that's not what happened. I was just going along with what my mom said. She ordered me to do all this, Brad. What are you saying? Your failed business, your failed relationships with young girls, your gambling debts, aren't these all you're doing? His mother confessed, exposing his deceit. According to his mother, Brad had been trying to marry a young woman after our divorce, a revelation that left me stunned. He also quit his job to start his own business, but it failed in just a month. Even with money, Brad was rejected by the unemployed man and became reckless, going around playing and gambling, saying that he had money and could afford it. He had said that he had almost no money left, and it seemed that it was indeed nearly zero. You brought this upon yourself. All this is Brad's fault, so at least forgive me. They both desperately pleaded, trying to shift the blame and groveling. This was truly ridiculous. No, I won't forgive either of you. And this isn't something from the past, is it? You were treating me like a servant until a moment ago, right? I retorted firmly. Not leaving when I asked you to leave is illegal. And since the furniture collected by my late father-in-law is now mine, you'll need to compensate me for that, I demanded. But all right, we will compensate you. Just please don't get the police involved. You wouldn't want me to go to jail, would you? Brad pleaded desperately. I actually don't care at all. By the way, we're married, I revealed, shocking them both. It turned out I was married to my former brother-in-law, Reagan. He was now my husband. It hasn't even been a year, and you've moved on to another man, my own brother at that. Brad exclaimed in disbelief. What are you talking about? You moved on before you were even divorced, didn't you? You wouldn't return Daisy to me, no matter how many times I asked. Stop clinging to the past already, Reagan countered, leaving Brad speechless. I don't care anymore. I'll pay for whatever damages there are. How much for my idiot husband's junk? Reagan asked, taking charge of the situation. Well, if we calculate roughly about $100,000, I replied. What? Brad and his mother were shocked. The furniture that my father-in-law had collected was all high-end pieces made by famous designers. Brad and his mother, who had no interest in these items, seemed to have believed they were just junk, I explained. You're going to compensate for what you've broken, right? We're not sure if we can get the same items, but make sure to pay properly, Reagan asserted. Unable to afford such compensation, Brad and his mother were distraught. For the time being, the police took them away for trespassing and vandalism. Of course, I didn't forgive them and went ahead with the lawsuit. Afterwards, Brad and his mother, who were desperately seeking help from Reagan, were bluntly rejected, with him saying, I'm ashamed to even be related by blood. Brad and his mother were likely receiving their just desserts together. And there's one more thing I kept secret. My father-in-law told me to sell the house and use the money as I wish. Reagan had told me that the price of the house was $100,000, but in reality, the document stated the value of the house around $500,000. It's a good location, so it might sell for a bit more. But for now, Reagan and I decided to take it easy in the house. My father-in-law left us with no plans to sell it. Eventually, we plan to sell the land and build a new house. I had some worries about having children, so after getting married to Reagan, I went to the gynecologist for a checkup. But there were no issues with either Reagan or me. Now, with the troublemakers gone, Reagan and I are living happily